by counsels for the accused. During today's session, counsel for Mr. Evidentiary will continue putting questions to you. Some of their questions had already been put last week, but they still have some more questions to put to you. The Chamber would like to ask that you focus on responding to the questions so that we can have your testimonies complete by the end of the day, if possible. We would like now to proceed to counsels for Evidentiary to proceed with their questions.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, witness, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. Sir, I would like to pick up where we left off last Thursday. And perhaps we can begin by revisiting what you told us at the time when I was asking you questions concerning the ability of your uncle to make decisions on his own. Do you recall that exchange?
Response: no, I don't.
All right. Well, you told us at the time, and I'm referring to page 95 of the transcript, and for those of, it might be easier to follow in Khmer and in French, it starts with 16.02.551 on the meter, and it goes all the way until 16.0517, and I do believe that we have a hard copy for the gentleman to follow along. And with the court's permission, perhaps we could provide the hard copy to the gentleman. Now, just above the portion that I mentioned, there's the question. And I've referred to a document to you where in it you drew some conclusions that Pol Pot could not make decisions on his own. And your answer was, when I was told at that time, I did not make such a conclusion as that my uncle could not make a decision alone. However, only when I witnessed the later situation that Tamak opposed Pol Pot, then it was clear to me that although Pol Pot was a secretary of the party at the time, now they did not respect him. So he could not make a decision alone. And the second point is that collectivism had more weight than individual decision. So the minor opinion had to abide by the major opinion. I then go on to ask you, I asked you about the period. When you say that Tamak went against Pol Pot, your uncle, just now, are you not referring to the period of 1996-1997 Is that not the period that you're referring to? Answer, I refer to that period, that is 96, 97. Question, and that's right after Son Sen and his family were murdered, presumably by your uncle. Is that right? And your answer was, yes, it was. So I want to focus today on this answer and then build on that to talk a little bit about what exactly you knew at the time. But first, can we conclude from your answer that when you spoke to the investigators, you had the 96, 97 situation in mind when you told the investigators that Pol Pot could not take decisions alone?
Response, yes, you could, because I did say so when we were integrated into the society.
I would most appreciate it, Mr. President, if my mic was not turned off. I think I can manage by myself. It's a little bit disconcerting for me to be looking at the light all the time. So if possible, the IT folks could allow me to self-manage. Now, you're not suggesting, however, from that answer, that from the period that you knew your uncle, going back to the jungle, all the way until the fall of Phnom Penh, and perhaps thereafter, that your uncle, Pol Pot, could not take decisions alone.
But response, yes, I did state so, and as already cited in your statement, it was the situation that the minority had to respect the majority opinion, which was part of the decentralized democracy.
Well, that's what I want to touch upon. Can you please explain to us how often, and perhaps you could give us an example, how often you witnessed meetings where this principle of democratic centralism or collective decision-making was actually taking place? Can you name one instance?
Response, I had never attended any meetings of the Standing Committee. I learned about this through my study sessions.
And your study sessions were about the principles set out. Is that correct?
Response, yes, I learned about it through those sessions.
And what have you here today, or what can you point to, anything, that would give us any confidence that at the time when your uncle was at the very top, that actually he abided by the principles you were taught of? Is there anything that you can show us?
Response, I already stated time and again. I would like to now repeat that my study sessions were conducted by my superior, including Pang and Ieng Sari, who conducted such sessions.
I understand the sessions and I understand the principle. But what I'm asking you, sir, is can you verify that those principles were actually abided by Pol Pot, who was at the very top?
Response. I don't know how precisely Pol Pot be abided by the principles, but on my part, I have been very careful and thorough in applying the principles.
I understand, but you would agree with us, would you not, that you're not quite at the level at Pol Pot. What Pol Pot was doing was secret, and you had nothing, and you were never part of whatever he was doing. Is that right?
Response. I think it is not fair to force me to agree with your question, so I don't feel comfortable being forced to agree with your comments.
You told us, at least on 2 occasions, that one had to mind his or her own business. Do you recall saying that? And do you still stand by that?
Response. Yes, I do.
And if we put it differently, can we say that the approach taken at the time, the way things operated at the time, was that transparency was actually forbidden?
Response. The work habits at that time, to me, were transparent. No one forbidden me from doing anything. For example, in my work, I had to do my best to work, to ensure that the works were properly done. However, I did not listen to any outsider.
And what about the work of Pol Pot and others? Was that transparent? Did they make sure that everyone, not just you, the nephew, the loving nephew, but others in the country knew exactly who was doing what and for what reason?
Response. The question is difficult to respond, but I do my utmost to respond by giving you the real situation. To put it simply, in the common study sessions, when Pang would also attend, when I say common study sessions, I mean I myself would be invited to attend the sessions, and other people from ministries would also be invited. and documents from the standing committees would be handed out to participants. And these sessions include the principle on the solidarity of the tribal people under the revolutionary flag, and also the 12 principles of ethics. And I had to follow what I have been taught personally. I don't know what other people were doing, whether they betrayed what being taught. It's up to them, because each individual was individually responsible for their own business. People could implicate me in their confessions or in other aspects, but I had to be very careful. I followed all the principles or documents being taught to me.
The two documents that you referred to just now, those were documents provided to you prior to the fall of Phnom Penh, back when you first went out into the jungle to meet Uncle Pol Pot. Is that correct?
Response. The documents concerning the solidarity of the minority groups under the revolutionary flag of the CPK were taught first, and the documents concerning the 12 principles of ethics were part of the daily routines in study sessions.
Now, if you did not attend any meetings of the Standing Committee, any meetings of the Central Committee, can you please tell us how it is that you know who ANCA is or who its members are?
Response. I'm afraid I cannot respond because I'm not sure myself, and I cannot answer these.
Well, last Thursday, you said that your uncle was, I believe, a member of it. Are you sure? Today, are you not sure of that? Are you not sure of your answer, that is?
Response. The term Angka, to my understanding through the study sessions back then, was not at the central level. Angka refers to people, general public, people who helped give their inputs. In conclusion, I can say that the ideas gathered from people, and that the Central Committee would take into account those inputs, and they become part of the decision by ANCA. So I don't know who ANCA is.
Well, was ANCA a group within a group within a group? Or is it some floating idea?
Response. Angka is the combination of inputs from people of all walks of life.
So does that mean that when you provide input to Uncle Pol Pot, that becomes part of the essence of ANCA? Is that your understanding?
Response. I never given my personal comments directly to you, but I was also part of a small Angkar because I belong to a small group that reported to other groups who reported to Brother Ieng Sari, who reported to upper echelon. And our ideas would have to go through these layers of levels. So it's now up to you to judge what Angkar is.
All right. So, from your answer, are you one of those needles in the ocean as well that you told us about last Thursday when you were describing Uncle Pol Pot being a needle in the ocean as an individual of Angkar? Is that what you're telling us today?
Response. Your question is more hypothetical because you would like to know my Pol Pot's philosophy. That's what I guess your question could have been. I agree. Pol Pot was a needle in the ocean, and I also am a drop in the ocean.
All right. And when you say a needle in the ocean, for those of us who may not fully appreciate what exactly you mean, can you please describe that? Tell us what exactly that means. Those of us who come from different cultures and don't use those expressions.
Response. If you are talking about a needle in the haystack, I also would like to ask you a question. Do you know these logos? These logos right in front of me. Do you know them? And I think I know them. Here, the flag of Cambodia, and this on the left-hand side, the logo for the United Nations. But what about the logo right in the middle? I don't know what it means. My apologies, Mr. President. Mr. President, witness, you are not allowed to put questions to parties in the proceedings. Indeed, you are here in your capacity as a witness to respond to questions. The chamber has not advised you about your rights not to put questions to the parties, but indeed, it is not your right to put questions back to any parties. If you are not able to respond to any particular questions, and because your response or questions are too complicated to do so, then you can do your best not to respond or to respond. It is up to your human ability to do so. So please be advised that you are expected to respond to questions that you can respond, and if it is far beyond your ability to explain or to do so, you may refrain from doing so. But please be reminded that you should refrain from putting questions to parties which are not allowed by the law. Response, Mr. President, Your Honors. For that, I will not be able to respond to the questions to counsel.
Just to be on the clear side, either before 1979 or after, did you ever have any conversations or discussions with Uncle Pol Pot where he described to you what ANCA was or who its members were?
ខ្ញុំបាទ
Response. I never chit-chat with him or other people on this.
Did you ever chit-chat with him concerning how ANCA operated?
Response. I stated the term Angka is understood through documents handed over to me during study sessions.
And beyond that, can you tell us, if you know, who the members of ANCA actually are? And I'm not asking for speculation, whether you actually know who they are.
Response. The real meaning of Angka is no way understood by me.
Very well. Now, what about the word center? Was there a definition of what the center is?
Response. Center refers to individuals at the supreme levels, including those people who worked or who had the authority over smaller organization or Angka.
And did you ever participate in any meetings with the quote-unquote center as a center?
Response. I had never attended any meetings in this center.
Do you know how the center operated?
I do not understand that.
Was there a hierarchy within the center where you would be able to identify a particular individual at the top and then others below with different responsibilities and functions?
I never saw any party statute which indicated that. Since the time I studied, I never saw something mentioned in the statute of the party.
And what about the term upper echelon? One often hears this term. Were there any documents that set out and defined the members of the, quote, upper echelon, unquote?
No,
I never saw that.
Were there any documents or any training sessions on how this so-called upper echelon operated, what its functions were, its responsibilities?
បាទអត់មានឃើញទេបាទ
No, there was not.
And can we conclude, or let me phrase it another way, you saw no documents, you had no study sessions. Did Uncle Pol Pot or anyone else discuss these concepts, center and upper echelon, with you at any point in time before or after 1979?
I only saw that in the introduction. If we had to acknowledge those who were sent by the center, at that time Pong was sentenced. At the ministry we had Ieng Sari, and these are the two people I contacted, who I thought were my superiors.
Let's talk briefly about Pong. Pong came from the outside, right? Maybe we have your answer. I saw you shaking your head, but we haven't received an answer. When Pong would come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he came from the outside. Is that correct?
Pong
was a person coming from the outside. However, he came from the central office.
And is the central office now something different from the center, or are we speaking about the same concept?
Let me give you an example. I was in the middle level. As a person at the middle level, I had to respect Pong when he came.
Let me ask the question again. Is the center the same as the central office? To your knowledge. If you don't know, just tell us you don't know.
President, can you answer the question again, because just now your mic was not activated? Response: they were different.
All right. Did you consider Pong upper echelon?
Yes, I did. He was an upper echelon.
Now, you told us that Pong, at least to your understanding, from what you were able to observe, was the head of Office 870. And you were also asked about Office S71. Do you recall that?
ខ្ញុំបាទអត់ចាំទេ
I do not.
ប៉ងហើយនឹងស21អត់បានចាំទេ
I do not remember about the connection between Pong and S71.
What about Y10? Was there a connection between Pong and office Y10?
មានទំនាក់ទំនងអីជាមួយនឹងប៉ងដែរឬទេតើអ្នកបកប្រែសុំកែប្រែតើយោ10នោះមានទំនាក់ទំនងអីជាមួយនឹងប៉ងដែរឬទេ
បាទខ្ញុំអត់ស្គាល់យោ10ទេ
I do not know Y10.
Office, you told us that Pong was in charge of security, of the security apparatus, and you told us that he was free to come and go within Phnom Penh. Do I have that right?
បាទខ្ញុំចាំចំណុចនេះ
I recall that point.
Now, was the security apparatus, their offices, if you know, were they located within the area where Office 870 was located, or was it located someplace else?
ខ្ញុំនៅភ្នំពេញ
I was in Phnom Penh.
ខ្ញុំដើរមានក្របខ័ណ្ឌខ្ញុំដើរ
I traveled within my framework.
ឃើញប៉ងអាចចេញចូលគ្រប់កន្លែង
I observed that Pong could went to any places as he pleased.
ដឹងថាប៉ងនេះចេញចូលបាន
I knew
កន្លែង
Pong could go to any place
ប៉ងអាច
he wanted.
ចូលទៅខេត្តបាន
So I also conclude that
ខេត្តវិញអីបានទៀត
he could also travel to provinces.
All right, so your testimony today is he wasn't just limited to Phnom Penh, he could go outside Phnom Penh. Right?
វិញទេគឺអាចដើរហើរនៅតាមបណ្ដាខេត្តផងតើអញ្ចឹងមែនទេ
បាទ
Right.
But getting back to my question, which was where was the security apparatus, where were the officers of the security that Pong was head of, where were they located? Do you know?
ត្រង់កន្លែងណាដែរលោកដឹងដែរទេ
ខ្ញុំអត់ដឹងច្បាស់ទេ
I do not know about that for sure.
Well, when you were part of the security apparatus, prior to being appointed by Pong to the MFA, where were you located when working for the security apparatus?
ធ្វើការនៅមន្ទីរសន្តិសុខតើលោកធ្វើការនៅកន្លែងណា
ខ្ញុំនិយាយពីខ្ញុំមកធ្វើការសន្តិសុខឬមួយក៏ប៉ង
Are you talking about me who was working in the security or you talking about Pong?
I'm asking you, sir, before you went to the MFA, you told us that you worked with Pong, and in fact you described one event where you had provided security under Pong's instructions and directions, in which your comrade, Chiem, also participated in. And my question is, at that time, do you know where the security office was located?
ពេលចូលភ្នំពេញ
When I went to Phnom Penh,
ការគឺថាវា
The situation was chaotic.
រុយគ្រាន់តែនិយាយនឹងចូលមាត់
There were flies everywhere. They flew into the mouth when we opened our mouth.
ថាសន្តិសុខនេះមិនមែនជារឿងសន្តិសុខអីទៅចាប់ទៅចោល
When I talk about the meeting of the security with Pong,
ស៊ើបអង្កេតអ្នកនេះនៅនោះ
I did not mean we held meeting about arresting people.
ទាំងអស់គ្នានេះបាន
The security meeting was about
មានរូបជាអីជាទីអី
that everyone
រឿងនេះវាតាក់
was to be healthy. It was about cleaning the city.
ហើយការសម្អាតនេះខ្ញុំបានជម្រាបលោកហើយណាមួយឆ្នាំអត់ទាន់បានស្អាតទេ
And
ហើយក្រសួងការ
I can tell you that the cleaning of the cities took more than 1 year.
បានជម្រាបពីមុនហើយគឺថាមិនមែនផ្សាររដ្ឋដូចឥឡូវនេះទេបាទ
And when I talk about
ក៏បាច់ក៏
market,
មើលទៅដូច
at that time, market
មួយដែរ
was not like the market we have today.
That's all fascinating. But you told us that before the fall of Phnom Penh, you provided security for Uncle Pol Pot. You then told us you came to Phnom Penh, where Pong met you. You then told us that on one occasion you provided security. Do you know at that time where the security offices were located? It's a yes or it's a no.
នេះខ្ញុំជម្រាបសភាពការទៀតបានយល់
Allow me to talk about the situation so that you can understand. When I went to Phnom Penh,
I have limited time. My question is precise. You're extremely intelligent. I'm sure you're capable of answering the question. Do you know where the security officers were located? If you don't, I'll move on. So humor me and just please answer the question.
អត់ដឹងទេអត់មានដូចអត់មានទីសន្តិសុខអីសោះ
I do not know. I don't think there was an office of security.
All right. Now you told us that Chiem also worked in the security apparatus before he too was appointed a position within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Do you recall that?
បាទចាំ
Yes, I do.
Did Comrade Chiem ever tell you where he was staying while he was working for the security apparatus? Or were you staying together?
តែទេហើយតាជាមនឹងលោកនៅជាមួយគ្នាឬក៏យ៉ាងណា
ជាមិនដែលប្រាប់ខ្ញុំថា
Jim never told me
មានទីសន្តិសុខទេ
that there was a security office.
សុខអីផ្សេងជាមិនដែលពិគ្រោះជាមួយខ្ញុំទេ
He did not discuss with me about any other security matters.
Did you ever ask him? Did you ever have any conversations with him since he was your subordinate and you were responsible for him while you were working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
ក្នុងក្រសួងការបរទេសលោកដែលនិយាយជាមួយគាត់ទេដែលសួរគាត់ទេ
សួរពីរឿងអី
What was I supposed to ask him about, sir?
Well, his function.
I never asked him about his functions because he was under my supervision.
All right. Now, you told us that Pong would come and go in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He would bring people and take them away as he wished. Do you still stand by that?
ការយកចម្លើយនេះដដែលឬក៏យ៉ាងណា
បាទ
Yes, I do.
You also told us that Comrade Chiem facilitated or assisted in transporting some individuals that had come to the MFA through Pong and he would transport them and deliver them someplace else. Do you stand by that?
លោកនៅតែរក្សាចម្លើយនេះដដែលឬក៏យ៉ាងណា
បាទ
Yes, I do.
Do you know whether, at that time, Comrade Chiem was still working for or attached to Pong's security apparatus?
បាទ
Yes, I do.
All right. So I want to be clear because perhaps my question wasn't clear. Was Chiem working under the authority of Pong while he was under your authority at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
បាទបងនេះនៅពីលើជាមទៀត
Yes, Pong was above Chiem.
Well, I'm not asking about the hierarchy. What I'm asking you, sir, is this. You've told us that Chiem worked for Pong at one point. You've told us that when Pong would come in to the MFA, Chiem would assist him. And now my question is, while Comrade Chiem was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and although he was your subordinate, was his superior still Pong? At least when it came to security matters.
បាទបងជាមេដដែល
Pong was still his superior.
And would that explain why you've told us that on one occasion you even asked Comrade Chiem if your turn would come next? Do you recall last Thursday where you said, and I'm quoting here, it's on page 16, we'll provide it to you because I do want to clarify one point, but it's at 09.53.44, Your Honors. On English it's page 16, but this would be last 26 April. That's 09.53.44. I knew that Chiem took those people away. I did ask Chiem about it. That is, where those people were taken to. And I said, could it be me next time? Do you recall saying that?
ខ្ញុំមិននិយាយដូចនេះទេ
I did not say it that way. It meant differently. And if you allow, I can say that again.
Okay, well, please explain to us so we're absolutely clear, because I'm dealing with the English version, and as I understand it, the Khmer version is slightly different. And I don't want to lead the witnesses, which is why I'm not proceeding with that. So please explain, and then I will show you the transcript as well.
មន្ត្រីរដ្ឋបាលតុលាការ
The President, court officer is instructed to bring the transcripts and show the portion relevant to witness before witness answer the question, because the question keeps moving around.
បាទខ្ញុំសូមបញ្ជាក់សំណួរនេះដូចតទៅ
Allow me to clarify this point as follows.
ពេលប៉ងឲ្យជាមមកយកមនុស្ស
When Pong
សួងការបរ
asked GM to take people from the MFA,
គេយកទៅ
GM came and took those people out.
ជាមមកវិញ
When GM returned, I asked him,
ព្រោះនឹងទៅគឺថាទាំងផិតទាំងភ័យផងទេណា
with my fear,
ថាគេយកទៅណា
where those people were taken to.
ខ្ញុំយកទៅគេទទួលយកទៅទៀត
And he told me that those people were taken from him further, and he did not know where they were taken to ultimately.
ដូច្នេះបានន័យថាខ្ញុំបានសួរមែន
So that meant I did ask him,
យកទៅណាបានគេជាមឆ្លើយ
and I asked him about where those people were taken to, and he told me that those people were taken from him further, and he did not know about the destination of those people. So I thought to myself, if that continued to happen that way, one day that could be my turn. This is what I meant.
All right, so I want to clarify 2 points, because the transcript says, at least the English version, and perhaps the French, which follows the English, would also say the same thing. It says, one, that you respond to GM, and I said, could it be me next time? So my question is, did you actually say it, or did you think it?
ពេលលោកខ្ញុំដូចនិយាយអញ្ចឹងមែន
It seems that I did say so before or in front of Jim that, well, it could be my turn.
And when you said it, were you kidding at the time? Was it a joke, or were you serious?
លោកនិយាយបែបមកចត់
គឺថាអារម្មណ៍ពេលហ្នឹងចេញឲ្យខ្ញុំ
My feeling was that time pushed me to say that I invite you to consider whether I was serious at that time, but I was being frank.
ខ្ញុំនិយាយជារបៀបអញ្ចឹងទៅកុំឲ្យខ្ញុំគិតថា
I said it that way
ទៅថាឯងចម្រិតសួរជាមសួរអី
because I did not want to be perceived that I was threatening Jim
ចិត្តខ្ញុំអញ្ចឹងទេ
for him to answer to my question. So I said it that way. Well, one day it could be my turn.
ប្រយ័ត្នប្រយែងហើយ
That meant I was being cautious at that time.
And when you said it, and I think that clarifies the matter, Your Honor, as perhaps as primitive as the way I put it, but when you said that to Comrade Chiem, did you actually think that despite of you being Pol Pot's nephew, that the possibility existed that one day it could be you?
President, Counsel, could you put the question again? Because in the Khmer language, we could not understand whether you gave a statement or you put a question to the witness.
My apologies. It's Monday morning, starting off a little tired. Sir, when you said that, in the manner in which you said it, I want you to reflect back, given the circumstances. Did you actually think that even though you were Pol Pot's nephew, that perhaps one day it just might be your turn?
បាទគិតអញ្ចឹង
I did think it that way.
Now, you told us about the prevailing fear, both inside the ministry and outside the ministry in general. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
What I would like you to do now is perhaps to reflect back to that period between 75 and 79. And for those of us who did not experience that period, to please describe to us what that feeling was about.
My feeling at that time was that I thought about my family who were in danger just like others. So my family members included my parents as well. That was my feeling at that time. And I was also worried about myself. I said about it several times. I was worried. And my talk with Jim, as I said, was done very cautiously. If I was spotted talking to Jim or to be close with Jim when he was executing the order from Pong, I could be in danger. So people around me might had a feeling that I had something to do with Pong, or whether I was connected to the fact that people were taken out by Jim. So I thought about all these things, and I was worried.
Now, you also told us back on 24 April 2012, this would be on page 51 of the transcript, going on to, I'm sorry, it would be on page 54 of the transcript, and it's right above the timer 14.37.03. You said that I myself was also worried, and I believe everyone else was also afraid. Do you recall saying that, and do you stand by it? That you believed everyone else was also afraid?
Response: yes, I do.
And can you please explain how it is that you believed that others were afraid? You told us about yourself, but what made you believe that others were also afraid at the time?
The President, witness, please hold on. Make sure your mic is activated before you proceed to responding to the question. Response: I have said time and again concerning my fear. First, I visited the countryside. People said that they suffered from not having enough food to eat, and arrests were made in the base, local areas. Secondly, in the ministries, chaotic situations happened, and that the Vietnamese troops had been approaching. So both at the bases and ministries, I don't know what happened at other ministries, but I can see that this happened everywhere. There were chaotic situations, and I would like to also talk further to conclude this. After the 9-layer of mechanism where people had to be taken away and executed, we knew that we were happy and that we were in peace. At that time, there was a new law stipulating that cooperatives could have more food to eat. However, this plan was destroyed by the arrival of the Vietnamese troops.
Let's focus on fear. At some point on page 64, which is by the timer 15.15.46, there's a question about being implicated and what the being implicated in documents meant. Do you recall having a discussion on that?
Response: No, I don't. I never discussed anything concerning these implications.
Well, let me ask you this way. Were you afraid that you might be implicated from outsiders, and that would be a cause for your arrest?
Response: At that time, yes, I were.
Now, you told us that you had a clean biography, and you told us that you were extremely careful in carrying out all your functions and duties. We also know that you were related to Pol Pot. Why would someone like you be worried about being implicated by others? And who might those others be?
Response: I wish to be brief on this. I know for sure Pol Pot had no family affection. He has no sense of nepotism, and it's absolutely not, and I knew this very well.
Why were you afraid of being implicated, setting aside what Pol Pot's sentimentality towards you were at the time?
Response: I think I may repeat my response to this same question. Then my answer remains the same.
Were others in the ministry as afraid as you were of being implicated?
Response. I think as long as I was very worried, there is no reason other people could not be so worried. They even were more worried than I was.
Now you told the co-investigative judges, and you've also said it here in court, that Ieng Sary was also afraid. Would that apply to him based on what you were able to observe and experience at the time?
Response. I did not hear what he said, but I could see his facial expression. He was saddened. He was very sad because he was very worried about his staff members, and he was saddened by the fact that his people, his staff, had to end up like that.
If we could look at one of the documents, and this would be E3/91, if we could have the assistance of the court. It's Khmer page 0020409798. French 00503936-37, and in English it's 00223593, and most likely it's on the very last page in all three languages. Sir, you've been provided with a document of a statement given in December 11, 2007. And let me read part of your answer. When ministry cadres and staff disappeared, Ieng Sary knew about it, but he said nothing. He himself was afraid. I was afraid too. And then you give an example, which is our next topic. But let me go on and read what you said. For example, the older sister of Q Terit, named Q Terat, an intellectual from France, whom Anka has sent to rest at Takmao. She subsequently died with marks of strangulation on her neck while she was under the supervision of Pong at Takmao. And then so do you see that part?
Response. Yes.
Now, when I look at this, I don't see the word sadden. I see that Ieng Sary was afraid, as you were afraid. Do you stand by that?
Response. Yes, I do. When we were sad, then our facial expression had to look like we are sad.
I'm speaking about afraid. One can be sad, but not afraid. Do you recognize the difference? Or to you, sadness equals fright?
Response. I don't know how the other people could pretend, but when I was afraid, I could never put on a smile on my face.
All right. And will you stand by what you told the judges, and I understand it, or these were investigators actually. Do you stand by what you said, that Mr. Ing Sari was himself afraid?
សំណួរជាប់ដែលសួររួចហើយចំនួននេះ
The President, the question is repetitious. Witness is instructed not to respond to it.
Very well. Let's look at the example that you gave as to why Mr. Ing Sari and you might have been afraid. Now, you mentioned Q Terat. You know this person, do you not?
Response, yes, I do.
And I believe you told us that she was the sister-in-law of Mr. Ing Sari. Is that right?
The President, witness, could you please repeat because you was not recorded? Response, yes.
Was Pol Pot's wife related to Q Terat?
Response, yes, they were related.
Well, please tell us how, so we have it on the record.
The two women were siblings.
All right. And so what we're talking about here, the example that you give us, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Pol Pot's sister-in-law, who was also Ing Sari's sister-in-law, was strangled by none other than Pong. Is that correct? If not by him, at his directions.
Response, I don't know because I was not close to that location. We were living separately and I did not know how his facial expression could have been.
You state here that when she was strangled, she was under the supervision of Pong. Is that correct?
Response, yes it is.
This is the same Pong, incidentally, that was head of security for your uncle back in the jungle, who was also your superior at the time, right?
Response, yes, it's correct.
And the fact that Pong, or at least I would just say Q Terat, under Pong's care and supervision, was strangled, while under the care and supervision of Pong was strangled, was that a cause of concern for you? And is that why you provide this as an example to demonstrate how you and perhaps Ieng Sary were afraid.
បាទចំពោះខ្ញុំ
Response.
ពេលនោះ
Yes, for me,
បងអៀងសេរី
I was afraid, and brother Ieng Sary,
លោកស្រីអៀងធីរ៉ាត់អៀងធីរ៉ាត់នោះស្លាប់
in the aftermath of the death of Mrs. Ieng Thirat,
ដឹងជាគាត់ភ័យ
he
ខ្ញុំអត់ដឹងដែរ
was not, Mr. Ieng Sary was not right in front of me. I did not know how his expression or facial expression could have been.
Very well. Now let's talk about another incident, and this is about Q. David, or Kun David. I don't have the exact spelling, but do you recall telling us about this individual, a professor of professors that you happened to hear about or meet?
ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់ជួប
Response. I used to meet the person very briefly,
ប៉ុន្តែគេធ្លាប់ប្រាប់ខ្ញុំ
but I was told,
ពួកបញ្ញាជនអនុក្រម
other intellectuals told me that Kun David was the professor of professors, and I didn't understand what that means. I was told that the person was the most outstanding student in France.
All right. And before we go through the details of what you said, all the details about what happened after you heard about this gentleman, do you stand by your testimony that he too vanished under Pong's supervision?
បាទ
Response, yes, it is correct.
Now, it might make sense to go over what you said so we can dissect it piece by piece. And this would be on page 72, Your Honors, of the transcript from last Thursday. The Khmer page number is 00803206-07. We don't have the French or the English, but it's in English it would be page 72. And the timer is at approximately, it's right below 14.12.23. And for your convenience, sir, I've provided the relevant portions of the transcript so you can follow along, because I will be referring to other pages, Your Honor. It'll be in English from 72 all the way to, I believe, 74, and then from page 89 to 90. Do you have the transcript in front of you, sir?
បាទមាន
Response, yes, I do.
Now, let's see what you said and see if we can make some sense of it. The person who I remember the most was Kun David. When I was working at the Foreign Ministry, I heard from other intellectuals who returned from overseas that there was one person by the name of Kun David. He was a very smart person. He, when he was studying abroad, he was the professor of the professors. I'm going slow so the French can catch up. Upon hearing that, I went to tell my uncle, Pol Pot, when I brought along with me with good fish and other foodstuff, then I were permitted to enter K1 premises. Now I want to stop here for a second. Let's pause. Sir, it would appear from what we just read that one, you heard of the gentleman from others, other intellectuals, and then you yourself went to meet Uncle Pol Pot. Is that correct?
Response: yes, it is.
And I take it they let you in to see your uncle because you had brought some good food for him, some nice fish and some good food stuff. So that was perhaps an even better reason why to let you in to see Uncle Pol Pot.
Response: yes, that is correct.
Now let's see what else you say. And when I met him, he asked me whether or not I noticed any smart intellectuals, and I told him that there was one person by the name of Kun David. Let's pause. It would appear here from your answer that it was Uncle Pol Pot that is asking you if you have heard of any intellectuals, any smart intellectuals. Is that correct?
Response: yes, it is correct. He asked me about that, about good people, about those who were loved and liked by the popular mass, and I did tell him as indicated.
Well, I don't see anything about popular mass and anyone being well liked in your answer. And so I want to make sure we're clear. Do you stand by your answer that you gave under oath last week that your uncle Pol Pot asked you if you've come across or heard of any smart intellectuals?
Response: yes.
And just so that we're clear, was this a single occasion or had there been other occasions when Uncle Pol Pot would ask about smart intellectuals, or when you would go to visit Uncle Pol Pot and report about smart intellectuals?
Response: yes, I went to see him only once, and that is the only one occasion I met him on this.
Okay, so let's go on. Then he asked me to check whether or not that person was that smart and we could actually use him to work for him. So that was the only person whom I know. I knew his name very well. Let's pause here. And my question is, how exactly were you planning to figure out whether this person was indeed that smart?
Response: I was not quite sure, but people who knew Kun David worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they told me about him. And the person in this context was the one I knew clearly, and I thought that he was a person we could use.
All right, well, forgive me if I am going over your answer very carefully, but it would appear from your answer that Pol Pot wanted to know whether this person was that smart and whether he himself, Pol Pot, and perhaps others, could use him. Is that correct?
Response. The question is not very clear. Could you please repeat? Are you asking whether Pol Pot would like to use this person or others?
Pol Pot. It would appear from your answer that Pol Pot wanted perhaps to use him, which is why he wanted you to check to see whether this person was that smart.
Response. According to my observation, Pol Pot was willing to use this person.
Now, let's see what else you have to say. And as for the others, for example, Brother Kun and others, I got to know that later on, but Kun David was a very well talked about. And then further, and then you repeat that, well, a question is posed to you. But let me go further down. And you're asked a question, and your answer is, well, that was his intention. He wanted him to work for him. This is right above Your Honor's 14.15.46. So, sir, if you look on your document, you'll see where you'll see your name, and it says, well, that was his intention. He wanted him to work for him. So it would appear from your answer that Pol Pot wanted Kun David to work for him. Am I correct? Or am I misinterpreting your answer?
I
said it was probably so, that's why he asked me that.
And then you go on to say, upon his instructions, I went to meet with Pong, and I told him accordingly, because I knew that Pong was the person who supervised those intellectuals. I did not know where Pong had taken other intellectuals to, but I believe that Pong must have known the person, and I told Pong that he should pay attention to that person. But unfortunately, his intention did not materialize because he, to date, he did come to work for him. So I want to clarify that point. Do you recall, first of all, saying this?
Yes, I do.
All right. Now, your uncle, Pol Pot, told you to go check and see whether that person was that smart. Why did you go to Pong? Why not go and meet with this intellectual, perhaps have a discussion, perhaps look at his biography, and perhaps go back to report to Uncle Pol Pot?
It was the way we worked. I could not enter other ministries. As for Pong, who was in charge of Bang Trabai, I had to go through him. If I did not go through him, it would be a problem for me. It was the rule at the time.
Now, this gentleman, Kun David, disappeared, at least to the best of your knowledge, correct?
Yes, it is.
And did you report that back to Uncle Pol Pot?
Yes, I did. No, rather, I did not report to him. Because at that time, the situation was very complicated. He was probably forgetting about that.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a second. But would it be fair to say that at least Pong was on notice that Uncle Pol Pot wanted to make sure that Kun David was safe and sound, so perhaps he could be employed by Pol Pot?
No, I do not really understand the question. Can you ask me again?
Yes. And my apologies. Pol Pot tells you to check on this person. You then, because you have to follow the chain of command or go through Pong, who's in charge, you bring it to Pong's attention. Are we in agreement so far?
I agree with that.
When you go and speak with Pong, do you let Pong know that it is Pol Pot, Uncle Pol Pot, who's asked you to check up on this person?
I did tell him so.
All right. So Pong would have been on notice that Pol Pot did not want anything to happen to Kun David, at least at that time.
It was probably so.
Now, if we could go through, and I know we're coming up to the time of the break, Your Honors, but if I, with your indulgence, 2 or 3 minutes to just end this chapter. If we could look at document E3/459, E3/459, and the Khmer number is 00204100-01. French 00524354. English 00223596, which is also on page 3 in the English. If I could have the assistance and permission from Mr. President to provide the gentleman with a document and also display it on the screen, it may be of some use. If you could just look at the sort of the page carefully, and I'm going to, I don't know where it is in the Khmer, but it should be underlined or highlighted for you. And I'll start in English. For example, once, probably in late 1978, I followed Ieng Sary to Bong Trebek site and met with a professor, a well-educated man, a Cambodian from France. So here there's a slight variation. You say you actually met this person at Bong Trebek. After that meeting, I reported to my uncle and told him that this person was well-educated and gentle. Again, here we see that you actually reported to uncle as opposed to uncle asking you. You then go on to say, but I returned once to see him again, and he had disappeared to an unknown place. Hing Un, the supervisor there, explained that this person had been taken away by Pong's group and had disappeared. When I told my uncle that this person had disappeared, he felt totally silent right away. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, I do.
Now, do you allow for the possibility that what you told the co-investigative judges, that you went back to report to Uncle Pol Pot about the disappearance of this individual, this professor? Do you allow for the possibility that perhaps at that time things might have been fresher in your mind and you might have given a more accurate account than the one you've given us here today? That is, that you never informed Uncle Pol Pot.
After my reconsideration, I understand that when the situation became intensified when the Vietnamese came in, I thought I did not report to him about the disappearance of David. It was probably after the Vietnamese came in that he asked me about David. I could have said about that after the Vietnamese came in. I may have been confused, but I did say that. But I don't remember when exactly I said that. But I did say that. It was probably after the Vietnamese came in.
And one final question before our the President perhaps breaks for the morning. Would Pol Pot, Uncle Pol Pot, would he have known that Pong was responsible for the disappearance of Kun David? Once you told him, that is.
ខ្ញុំមិនដឹងគាត់យល់យ៉ាងណាដែរ
I did not know what he thought about that. I did not ask him about that.
I'm not asking you what Pol Pot thought. I'm asking you whether Pol Pot was aware that you had informed Pong and that it was under Pong's supervision that this professor, Kun David, had disappeared.
Monsieur le Président.
President, witness, please hold. Yes, international co-prosecutor, you may proceed.
I understand Counsel Carnavas's line of thought, but there is a question, however, because the witness might be confused in terms of dates. He mentions no dates in the questions that he puts to him. For example, he doesn't say when the visit took place at Bong Trabet, when the report was made to Pol Pot, when Kun David may have been removed from Bong Trabek, and if Pang was still back then the head of Office 870. So maybe to clarify things, could we specify the periods that Counsel Carnavas is referring to?
President, thank you, international co-prosecutor. Yes, Mr. Carnavas, you may proceed with a clear question. As you have a lot of questions, they may be confusing, and you are reminded of referring to specific periods so that it is easier for the witness to follow and to respond to your question. Besides, the events happened more than or almost 40 years ago. Only a few people had good memory that can recall the details that happened 40 years ago.
I appreciate the observation and the comment. I was about to get to it. I first wanted to get the verification of awareness. It may take a few moments, Your Honors, so perhaps we could take our morning break now, or I will need about 5 minutes to wrap this up. I'm at your disposal.
President, it is now appropriate for us to take the morning break. We will break for 20 minutes. Yes, Defense Counsel for Evidentiary, you may proceed. Counsel Angwadom, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Mr. Evidentiary requests that he waive his rights to be present in this courtroom for the remainder of today's proceedings and to follow the proceedings from a holding cell downstairs due to his health concerns that he cannot sit in this courtroom any longer. President, thank you, Counsel. You may be seated. Having heard Mr. Evidentiary's request that has been made through his counsel, that he requests that his rights to waive his rights to be present in this courtroom and to follow the proceedings through audiovisual means due to his health reason, the Chamber grants the request of Mr. Evidentiary that has been made through his counsel, that is to waive his rights to be present directly in this courtroom and to follow the proceedings from a room downstairs for the remainder of today's proceedings. The Chamber requires that counsel submit to the Chamber immediately the waiver that is made by Mr. Ieng Sri with a signature or thumbprint of Mr. Ieng Sri. The AV unit is now instructed to live the proceedings to the holding cell. Security guards are now instructed to bring Mr. Ieng Sri to the holding cell downstairs, where audiovisual means have been equipped for him. The court is now adjourned.